welcome once again for another edition of Night Shift here. Of course, I am Kyle Nash, the student of the game, in the host chair for Jeff Sharon. Eric Lopez under the weather or on assignment, depending on how you want to pose it there. Nick Porcelli also on assignment to rest and relax after a long UCF basketball season. But nonetheless, here we are to go through some things. Of course, we got some stuff. I know. Stickball started. Why is Kyle here? Yeah, don't worry about it. We got Bryson Turner to handle that action as well. And of course, the UCF men's basketball team has wrapped up their action in the conference tournament. A pretty formidable appearance for a team that was supposed to be predicted last. And of course, we have newcomer Jake Ferraro in for that. Did an excellent job on the last episode, giving us an account. Of course, with UCF facing Oklahoma State once again. I mean, we got to go to you for this one. UCF, of course, getting the conference victory, the first Big 12 conference victory in franchise history. I guess less and less we'll be able to use that first Big 12 X thing here to the season, closing out with that. But Jake, listen, I listened very intently last time you were on, talking about the last time UCF was there battling the Cowboys of Oklahoma State. And you had said that program was on the cusp of, let's just say, of losing their coach. Wouldn't be the first time. UCF was the last victory before somebody fired their coach. There's famous examples throughout UCF history with that. But, I mean, you were basically a prophet for the upcoming game. What do you think was the difference in the we'll start with the tournament win, obviously, as UCF has since been eliminated by BYU. But what did you see in that Oklahoma State game that UCF did well?
They took over the second half. Of course, thank you, Kyle. Thank you, Bryson, for letting me come on, of course. But the second half, they completely took over the game, and it was pretty evident that Oklahoma State was not up to tempo whatsoever. The end of the first half, UCF was up 4, if I remember correctly, right? They were up 4 or 5. It was somewhere around that.
At the half, you're saying?
Yeah, first half. They were up 4 or 5.
Okay.
And it was 4? Okay. And the second half, they went on a 9-0 run just over 2 minutes into the half. And I had a feeling right there that UCF was going to win that game. And shortly enough, they continued to score. OSU didn't score its first point until with 5.5, 6 minutes to go. And it was a free throw. And they didn't score their first field goal until almost 12 minutes left to go in the half. I mean, the defense of UCF was just so dominant. It was really impressive to watch. They had, I think, 4 or 5 guys with 2 steals each, and they also had 2 guys with 3 block shots each. So you see that right there. I mean, you're going to have the impact for the rest of the game in the half. And I think OSU as a team shot somewhere in the low 30s or high 20s shooting percentage. So the second half was just dominant. They led by as much as 27. But it was a great win. I mean, first tournament win in the Big 12 in school history, and it was great to be there in Kansas City.
Yeah, I mean, listen, say what you will about the barbecue or any of that, but yeah, to your point, I mean, defense has always been a mainstay for Johnny Dawkins, and you mentioned, the shooting struggles for Oklahoma State. I mean, what jumps off the page to me, too, is UCF chucking it from 3, hitting half of them in the 18 attempts. I mean, that's when you're bombing it like that, you're going to be a problem. You got 9 blocks by the Knights as well. Ibrahim Diallo doing his part, getting a couple of those blocks in there too. The marshal of the block party, as I like to call him. I don't know. What would you have to add to what that particular game there, Bryson?
I mean, this was definitely a showcase for the front court. Ibrahim Diallo and CJ Walker dominating both offensively and defensively in this one. That's not to say that, and also Dejan Osila getting a couple of blocks there, Omar Payne. I think UCF's depth, really came to play here because 4 people coming off the bench got double digit minutes for this one. I think this was just one of those games where UCF's depth really proved key to this one, and most everyone was able to distribute the action fairly well. But I think if anything, Ibrahim Diallo showcased why he's one of the league's better defenders this time. And then of course the defense in the beginning of the first half. I mean, that might be one of the finest defensive performances I've seen Johnny Dawkins, head up. in his time at UCF. But fire him. Am I right? But I think
the building.
If anything else, I think that win will and then we'll see what happens with the NIT, because the selection show for that is going to be Sunday night. Yeah. So we'll see what happens there. But I do think that Johnny Dawkins in the Big 12 deserves to keep going for at least a few more years after this. I really want to see what he does.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, go ahead, Jake.
I didn't mean to interrupt you, but Bryson, for anyone who's saying they want to fire him or whatever it is, at the end of the day, Kyle, you hit this, UCF was supposed to be predicted to be dead last in just about every single Big 12 prediction before the season started. New conference, playing with new teams. Not many coaches in the Big 12 know what Dawkins, what his ability is. But, I mean, the depth of the team, Bryson, you said four guys in that game got over 10 minutes off the bench, and Jones had 7 points. He was 3 of 4 from the field. Avery was 2 of 2 from 3, and Silla had 9 points. They were a very talented team on Tuesday. I think the depth of the team is going to be good. One thing I will say, which jumped out immediately, was when UCF got really rolling, the crowd got into it. And Jeff asked me this, for UCF to be in the Big 12. And I said, of all the teams outside of Houston, because Houston's very obvious, they're a consistent basketball team, but I said UCF fans are excited to be in a conference. Like, they want to be recognized like Miami is, like Florida State, like Florida. Like, they're excited to be in a Power 5 conference. Now it's going to be Power 4 because the Pac-12's done. But regardless, like, the fans, they care. And they really got loud once UCF got rolling.
Yeah. By the way, I do want to ask you, Jake, how speaking of UCF fans, how did we end up traveling to Kansas City?
Well, I will say, though, because it's so close to Kansas City, the majority, there were still people, even though KU was not playing, it was still mostly Jayhawk fans and also Wildcat fans. But toward the end of the game, the orange from Oklahoma State fans got out of the building, and most of the people were there. They had the marching band there. They had the cheerleaders there. They had the players' families there. The players' families were making noise, and they were sitting right behind me, actually, as I was courtside, and they were yelling at the OSU players to, like, brick the shots or whatever. But at the end of the day, they care for their team, man. They really do, and Kyle's actually kind of laughing at that.
Yeah, no, and that's an awesome thing to me. We'll touch that a little bit more with the BYU game. Of course, I'd be remiss. I know I didn't have a double-double from Ibrahima Diallo on the bingo card for that victory, but sure enough, leading the scoring in the game. For much as we talk about his defense, I want to make sure I gave him props for that too. Heading over to the BYU game, of course, obviously we didn't have a physical presence there, but certainly a lot to talk about from this particular game as well. I don't know, Bryson. It's hard for me to look at a game like this, and Jake, feel free to ring in where you see something too, but if I saw a stat line that had Darius Johnson with 32 points, I would have never predicted UCF losing the game, but I think a lot of that came from just the ridiculous start where BYU was just shooting the lights out of the building. They, of course, finished shooting 46% from behind the arc in 30 attempts. That's just tough to overcome, right? When they come out shooting the lights out like that, anybody is going to have trouble beating that team. That's kind of how UCF lost to Stetson, who, by the way, won their conference. So yeah, that's a fascinating thing to me when you can shoot the ball like that. What do you guys think?
Darius Johnson kept them in that ball game. Mm-hmm. I think if Darius Johnson did not, this was one of the best games of his career. I really do. Like, at least from an individual perspective. And if he didn't go off like he did, I feel like we'd be having a completely different conversation of, oh my gosh, we completely blew it. Like, we won one game and then we gave up. But no, Darius Johnson basically willed them to make it at least a little bit of a game.
Within 3 at some point in the second half. Exactly.
And so all the credit in the world goes to Darius Johnson, and that's one of the reasons that he has been a leader on this team from the beginning. And as much as we love the shiny new toys of Ibrahima Diallo and Jalen Sellers, who've done amazing jobs this year, Darius Johnson has been here this entire time, and it's performances like that that show you why he has the staying power that he does. Another thing I actually kind of noticed in this one is that they weren't really using the depth as much. Only 4 people got off the bench at all in this one. And I mean, obviously I can kind of understand why, Oklahoma State, you have much more of a cushion, so you're able to use more players to rest your starters. But I think it kind of shows that the fact that he kept his starters on for so long, that sometimes you can, wear them out a little at the end when you got to keep it close there at the end. I will say though,
foul trouble was an issue too, Bryson. Let me clarify that a bit too. Like, guys, there's 4 players I see who had 3 fouls, for example, and there was just a tear where part of that first half success by BYU, where there were a number of fouls. They got to the free throw line as well, 18 shots here, not to mention a tech on the bench that just handed some more first half momentum to BYU. I think there's an element of the rotation. Like, I'm seeing Antoine Jones, who's not a starter. He had 3 fouls. That was a situation where that was part of the issue too. And then you get bench guys in some sort of foul trouble. There's another factor there too. Not to mention, we talk about perimeter defense and how a lot of their depth aren't necessarily guys that can lock the perimeter to the same. And I would say it's more to that than just desperation. I think there's a lot of factors that came into play there.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I will say though, aside from the 3 fouls, Antoine Jones, 13 points off the bench, playing 25 minutes, 5 of 11. I mean, Jake mentioned he went 3 of 4 in the last one. This was a pretty good tournament for Antoine Jones, honestly. And I think this definitely bodes well for UCF's front court for the general future. Obviously, we have Darius Johnson, who still has another year of eligibility left. Jalen Sellers is listed as a junior, so he has another year of eligibility to come back. And then you have I think the front that backcourt of Johnson, Sellers, and Jones is a really good triple threat to have going forward, which, I mean, oh my gosh, this basketball team could actually have some consistency, maybe. Who knows? Because of the roster turnover. We'll see what the portal is. College basketball is like so transfer portal happy, but one guy can hope. Am I right?
You can always dream, Bryson. Jake, let me take it over to you to kind of wrap up not just this game, but tell me what excites you about this team, but the prospect of a potential NIT berth. As after all, as we're recording this, the selection show is still a good 2 or 3 days away. When it comes to this team, if you're in a situation, obviously it depends on who they draw, but the leadership that Darius Johnson brings has to give them an advantage come tournament time, don't you think, Jake?
Absolutely. TCU, before the tournament, he finished with the best game of his career. I remember Bryson in the chat was like, wow, you got to see his best game of his career, because he had a new career high against TCU. It was 33 points. And I asked him in the post game, when UCF lost to Cincinnati in late January, he had just 2 points. And after that, he proceeded to have at least 10 points for the rest of the season, and to finish the regular season on a career high. That had to make him feel pretty good, and he was still humbled. Just motivates me. In the tournament, there was a couple 3 balls he made that he knew was going in. He's a really exciting player to watch. And as Bryson said, next season, you get him, you get Sellers, you get those guys. They all play with each other in the Big 12. They play for a year. They get the experience. They get to build some more chemistry, and he's going to be really fun to watch. Definitely keep an eye on him for finishing top 5, I would say, in scoring next season, because he got really hot toward the end. But I wanted to ask this, Bryson, because I didn't watch it. I was driving back from Kansas, and I actually had to cover the OSU softball game against Central Arkansas for a newspaper in Conway. Shout out to my sports editor, Mark Buffalo, if he's listening to this. But Bryson, what happened during the altercation that happened with Dawkins and the BYU coach? Because I didn't see it.
Yeah, actually, it wasn't me either, because I was actually in an exam at a midterm at the time.
Oh my goodness!
It was. Yeah, I was. The life of a graduate student. But look, Johnny Dawkins is. I'll say this: Johnny Dawkins is, I would say, the biggest definition of class. I think the guy, opposing coaches have said that about him all season.
Bill Self, particularly.
Yes, exactly. And so he is someone that does not really like initiate, confront other people, I would say, without good reason. I remember during the whole horns down controversy when he was asked about that in the media, he wasn't really sure exactly what happened, and so he said he would look into that and figure it out accordingly. And it's good on him for showing some restraint there, because he didn't know, and so he got the information and then figured that out from there. And so he was very cognizant of the fact that his players aren't perfect, and so perfect, but at the same time, he still is like, I'm not going to say like, oh, whatever they did, it's not good, that type of thing. So I would just say it like with Pope and him, I think whatever he does it for his players, but he also does it with respect, and he doesn't tolerate no nonsense type of stuff,
Yeah, the horns down thing was absolutely was so ridiculous. I mean, look, for anyone, I know UCF's brand new, but I mean, the horns down gesture has been going all around from Oklahoma to Oklahoma State to Texas Tech, all the way to West Virginia. And of course, it's a penalty. Oh, it's disrespectful. I mean, it's part of the game. And honestly, say what you want, but the hook 'em horns thing is the easiest thing. It's the easiest thing to mock in all the Big 12, or probably just of all college signs in general. It's the easiest thing to mock. I mean, it absolutely is. I mean, if that's the case, you could take the forks up thing from Arizona State and do forks down. I mean, literally, it's so easy to mock. Like, why? Just because you're Texas and you got Earl Campbell and Ricky Williams and KD that you got the don't mess with Texas attitude? Like, really grow up a little bit, I think.
Oh, if only Texas wasn't leaving for the SEC. I feel like UCF Texas would have a very fun little rivalry after that. It's
absolutely.
People have come to completely forget about the fact that UCF fans were so well conditioned to use horns down with USF. It was kind of in the blood. It was just a reflex, if you will. And now that USF is so far in the rear view, as far as getting into a big conference, they had to find that. That's my working theory, gentlemen. That's all I'm saying. Anyways,
it's simple. You're a Texas fan. Okay, well, I'm not a Texas fan. I mean, really, it's the easiest thing to mock as far as hand signals go. The only coach I know that was irate about it was Nick Saban when Bama beat Texas in Austin in 2022, and he yelled, "Don't do that!" And he bleep, you know what? But he was the one player who said, "Don't do it."
Yeah, I actually forgot Saban that did that. That's a good point, Jake. But
yeah.
Listen, I think that kind of puts a bow nicely on the Big 12 conference tournament. A football school making noise more than they should and making an NIT berth in its first year in the best basketball conference in the nation ain't so bad. And I'll say this, when UCF was pulling the comeback, I heard some of that second half to hear the relatively neutral fans that were just there for the sake of the fact that they're at the Big 12 tournament. A lot of them were cheering for UCF as they were pulling back into the game. And it's interesting to hear how they've kind of been the darlings among the four, unless, of course, you were from Texas. But Jake, thanks for jumping aboard and talking some UCF hoops with us here. We'll certainly be talking about the hopefully an NIT berth here sooner than later and how that's going to go. And tell the people where you can be found.
I can be found. Thank you again, Kyle and Bryson, for letting me join. You can follow me on Instagram at JakeXF_, and my X account now, famously Twitter, 18JXXX18. And I will be at 2 UCF softball games at Oklahoma State. They start tonight, and I will be at the game on Sunday. So for those of you listening, you can follow my X account, and I will be posting updates throughout the game. Looking forward to it. Thank you guys again, And have a good rest of your weekend. And happy St. Paddy's Day if one of you two are Irish, because I don't know if you are or not, because I'm not.
But hey, listen, your Stars gear, your Dallas Stars gear certainly has that base covered. And by the way, you watch for his content too, covering the Dallas Stars as well. So thanks for jumping in, Jake, and get back to your homework. Academia before spring break. Knock it out, brother, so you can have some sláinte this weekend.
Thank you, Kyle. Thank you, Bryson.
Jake Ferraro, folks. I think there's a lot to look up for here, as amongst programs that were expected to struggle. The two biggest two were both in the hoops stratosphere, so to speak, both men's and women's basketball. I know that that the women's team was eliminated first round by Cincinnati. That is what it is. I think that they had the longest road, but give it credit to Dawkins and the men's basketball team. Sure, fire Johnny, but by the same token, if you think they did a bad job this year, #you problem.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the same, by the way, credit goes to the women's basketball team, because look, they definitely losing in the first round to Cincinnati is definitely not a great way to end things. But you look at Caitlin Peterson once again, leading the way, like with a whole bunch, like she 23 shots, 31 points. The good news is I feel like that is if you can keep her for next year, again, transfer portal notwithstanding, if you keep her for next year, that's another kind of building block for Satia Messer to have going forward. I honestly think that she had a much harder coaching job coming in than Dawkins did coming into the Big 12, because Messer was still trying to restock the cupboard after Abe basically cleared it, except for maybe one can of beans, that being Destiny Thomas. When she left,
Juven's credit, she's a little bit more than a can of beans. I'm gonna throw that out there.
Well, yeah, it's very true, but we hadn't really seen her play on the court that much before that. Layla has only really emerged as a major presence on the court in the Satia Messer era, despite being an Abe recruit. So the performances I've seen from women's basketball this year, I think shows that they are on the right direction, but this is still very much, you can still really tell that this is like year two of of almost a complete program reset. There was improvements over year one, but there's definitely still a long ways to go in terms of getting up there with the rest of the Big 12. But they've had moments. Had moments.
I'll say this to kind of wrap up talking women's basketball. You mentioned specifically Caitlin Peterson. I know they're losing Maya Burns. Honestly, I think filling that role will be the toughest of all of them. I'll be honest, and this isn't a knock on Caitlin Peterson as a player. I think she's an excellent scorer. Were she to leave, I really think that's a piece that they can recover from. Because beyond scoring, what she contributes is only so much. And really, frankly, I wonder if there were times when this team was too Caitlin Peterson dependent. And then with all the recruiting, you've heard Coach Messer talk throughout the year about recruits he's got coming in and how they're of size. By the way, this team is going to look more and more like a true Big 12 team, at least as far as the tail of the tape and size goes here in the coming year. They got significantly bigger with Kialan Ngodu, Jayla Kelly, and Ashella Cott, all just bringing great size to the squad. Jayla Kelly, I think she walked on senior night, so she may be wrapping it up herself. But there's recruits coming in of more size. And who knows, it could be the kind of thing if Caitlin Peterson were to move on. I think all that may change is the offensive philosophy of the team. And that could be an improvement, and to not be so dependent on a conference player, all conference team selection, by the way. But I think there may be logistical positives that could be reaped were she to leave. Not to say I want her to go, but let's just put it this way. If I'm asked who's the bigger loss, she or Ashella Cott right now, I think the upside of Ashella Cott is much bigger than anything Caitlin Peterson would give you today in the long run.
Yeah, very true. But I mean, is it too much for ask for both? I mean, a young
I said I want both too, Bryson Turner.
Caitlin Peterson, by the way, going through all of her stats now, 599 points on the season. That's the second highest scoring season in program history.
Awesome.
Kyle Nash. Only Christy Burns from like the 80s had a higher scoring season than her. 20.7 points per game. That's the third highest scoring average in program history. And now, to be fair, she did shoot the ball a lot. She ended up shooting the ball 518 times from the floor. That's the sixth most in a season in program history. She was also 138 of 183 from the free throw line. That's fifth and seventh in program history, respectively. So very good performance she got to the line a lot. And she also actually managed to get into the top 10 all time for single season 3-pointers. But again, a lot of it is based off of volume. And so
I like that she stayed healthy though.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm glad to see it. B, good for her in keeping in shape and doing the right stuff and all that to achieve that.
Oh yes, considering the injuries the injuries that women's basketball has had over the last couple of years. Morgan Robinson Wagu was eliminated. Was basically out all of last year. Nay Hutton's been here through like 2 years, and she's been injured for like 75% of it. So
that's not an exaggeration, Bryson. I think that's pretty close. Yeah,
it's very and then of course Jayla Kelly getting hurt now, which kind of forced Kyle Nagodu into the spotlight in the first place, because that's right after her injury was kind of where Kyle really broke out.
If I were to give a most improved award, it would be to Ngodu, no question on that. But,
so I think if anything, this season really showed is at least a very good sign of young faces that could become the leading elder stateswomen in a couple of years on a very good basketball team. Like, I think, like, sure, if Caitlin Peterson comes back, this year would be next year, but I do agree with you in the sense that losing an Ashola Codd or Kyle Nagodu would be a little bit worse, because Kayala and Ashol are players that you can really build around.
Right. And listen, that phenomenon is exactly what Coach Messer promised, that growth, finding these young players and building the program, and restocking the cupboard in question, Bryson Turner. But
so anyways, the long term, if Johnny Dawkins is really good at the short term coaching job of roster turnover year after year being what it is, I think Satya Messer is a much more of a long game type of coaching job.
I think she had to be. I think she was forced into that role more than it was. I'll put it this way: the jury's still kind of out on a couple things. For these injured players like Morgan Robinson and Nguagwe, like having the role she did. I mean, for a good portion of the season, she was easily the sixth player, and even started some games when injury forced it. Yeah, there's a lot there. I'll put it this way: your statement is well made. I don't want to just limit her by saying she's only done that. She's also made, Caitlin Peterson herself and Maya Burns, both transfer acquisitions. Let's not forget about them either. So there's been a little bit all into the soup that is the women's hoops roster. But let's go ahead and get out of hoops. And I wanted to briefly touch on spring practice starting for football, and a lot of cool things going on here right now. Of course, we had the opportunity to head to spring practice today, and Tyler Whit-Wren is a running back that didn't get a lot of play coming into this year and has come on the scene something big, had a really huge run in practice today, talked to offensive coordinator and former running backs coach Tim Harris, and just what he's done and the heads he's turned. Of course, that's worth mention too. But I spoke a little bit with Coach Harris about what it is that keeps this running back room. I mean, Bryson, since 2017 and possibly beyond, the running back room has been awesome for UCF. And I asked Tim Harris about what it is that keeps that tradition alive. And really, at this point, he puts it more on the players than the coaches, right? You have an Isaiah Bowser, you have an RJ Harvey, and this isn't to put out Johnny Richardson Mark Anthony Richards or Bowman or any of the other guys. Like, the older guys have worked with the younger guys to help them know where the bar is at and what they have to hit. And this was really kind of a theme that I heard about throughout today, is in Gus bringing in coaches that he's familiar with, right? You know, they have the new defensive coordinator with whom Gus has previously coached. Coach Harris, of course, is a guy that Gus has previously worked with. And that balance, when I asked Coach Harris today about why the offensive line has still got a chemistry and a cohesion and the way they develop it so quick with all these transfers, Coach Harris said it was about all the familiarity in the coaching on the offensive side. So it kind of starts there, and what we're seeing is it's trickling in down to the players. But let me ask you this. I know we're 3 practices in, Bryson, but what's something you're hoping to see out of this football team here in the spring?
I'm really hoping to see a team a team possessed, almost, in a sense. And I say it like this because this is the last year, I would argue, of a certain, I don't want to say era, but of a certain like generation, maybe, in a sense, of certain UCF players. You have someone like an RJ Harvey who's going to be gone. You have Kobe Hudson. You have several defensive players as well. And so I feel like with this group of seniors who I think have done fairly well under the Gus Malzahn era over these past couple of years, this is their last chance to get a Big 12 title right away. Mm-hmm. I think getting a guy like KJ Jefferson, I think, really gives you an idea of where UCF's priorities are at this point in time. And I think that you need to see that in practice. Like, is this this is a Big 12 championship contending team, and we need to show it, and we need to act like it. And this is, I think, is their last chance to do it in the short term. I feel like that in the short term, though, is what I mean. Because after this class, this group of seniors, I feel like, barring transfer portal recruits, that kind of thing, I think it's going to end up being another long-term thing where, okay, we're going to need to wait a couple of years for some new these younger stars that just come in the Big 12 era to mature a little more. So I guess I would say, like, the AAC, these AAC like seniors, these AAC upperclassmen, take them to a Big 12. It's very interesting. It's like there's these AAC upperclassmen, and then there's these Big 12 recruits that are all coming together to see if they can win that Big 12 title. And I think that along with these transfers, and I think this is if there's any year that they can do it, it's this year.
Well, and there's a little something to that. I think I see what you're getting at, but what I would argue is that in important positions, they have the heirs apparent. Maybe not so much quarterback, not knocking Dylan Risk or Timmy McLean. We don't know where they're really at yet. In my opinion, they haven't had that offseason to develop as yet, such that it is right. So I'll say the jury's still out there. But KJ Jefferson coming in, you mentioned that. I talked to Marcellus Marshall, the offensive tackle, about what it is playing with him and what it is that jumps off the page interacting with him in the huddle. And while everybody else will point out he's huge, this large human, the first thing that the lineman said was, hey, intelligence, knows the game. And I mean, all quarterbacks are supposed to lead by example. That part didn't really get my attention, but the fact that Marshall had pointed out that this is his intelligence and capture of what's going on is what impressed him, really left off the page for me. And I asked him, how cool was it to have a quarterback that's big enough to throw a block himself? He found that entertaining as well. Mm-hmm. But really what jumped off the page for him being KJ's intelligence, despite the specimen that he is physically, the difference maker he is physically, is really encouraging. A few passes I saw thrown in practice, I'm really impressed by the touch that Dylan Risk has. KJ Jefferson has some touch too. I think a lot of the misses today, of course, were mostly about chemistry and him being new in the building, but I don't feel like he looked awful either.
Oh yeah. How would you say KJ's chemistry with the wide receivers is doing?
That's still developing. Like I said, that's something. But I mean, it's spring practice week 3, and really the best question, of course. Well, Kyle, what did you think of the linebackers? They're not really hitting like that yet. I'm reserving judgment on that. But look out for future episodes of the Night Shift and later articles upcoming on the Black and Gold Banneret. Bing! But blackandgoldbanneret.com. I think I don't blame you for asking, Bryson, because I know that there are UCF fan aplenty that will and would, but I'm not prepared to really pass that judgment. There weren't any huge connections made like you may have seen on Monday by Timmy McClain out there in the socials or anything like that. But like I said, the big story, Tyler Wren breaking off the big run, and they were working more on the run game today, practicing a lot of stuff on the ground. Of course, I can't get into details, obviously, but let's just say the run game is still going to be a very explosive element, and KJ Jefferson being in position to zip the ball down the field. Listen, Tim Harris has mentioned it in his conversation with the media today that throwing the ball down the field is still, of course, going to be a big part of the offense. I mean, Kobe Hudson is in this lineup that sort of demands it, and I'll leave it at that. But let's go overhead and change fields from the gridiron to the diamond. Bryson watching a lot of stickball in all its forms for the Black and Gold Banneret here. Of course, most recently, I believe you've been attending baseball, and this is the first year under a new coach doing all of that. What do you think of them so far, Bryson?
Well, they've run into their first adversity of the year because their first conference series took them to Norman, Oklahoma to take on the Sooners. And, ooh, boy. Well, let's put it this way. It started off okay. Game 1 of a doubleheader on Saturday. The game 1 got delayed to the Saturday due to weather on Friday. So the first game was interesting. It was a very close affair the entire way, going back and forth. The problem is that UCF ended up shooting itself in the foot. They ended up committing 4 errors in the game. To put that in perspective, coming into that day, they had 5 the whole season, and they had 4 in that one game. In fact, the UCF's pitchers only gave up 1 earned run the entire day out of the 4 that Oklahoma scored. So this was definitely a game that I think UCF very much could have won, but they just ended up shooting themselves in the foot, whether it's by the errors or by Oklahoma just kind of getting that one up on them. And oh yeah, that winning run ended up coming off of a throwing error, which sailed past the third baseman, which allowed the runner to score. So that's a very much a what could have been type of thing. But at the very least, they were in the game. That cannot be said for the other 2 games, which Oklahoma got out to, just jumped out ahead in game 2 really early and just never let it go. They ended up winning that one 11-3. Just unfortunately, they really had to starter Tyler Nesbitt's number. And if you look at the rotation for this week against Oklahoma State, you can see that Nesbitt is not on it. So I feel like that can kind of tell you all that you need to know after this performance against Oklahoma, though the relievers certainly had their issues. It had their issues as well, but Oklahoma kind of already got up ahead by a lot at that point. So it is what it is. That one just did not end up going UCF's way. Lost by a good bit. Then game 3 happened, and then that's the first time that they've been run ruled the entire time. We lost via the run rule. Not fun. Not
great, Bob.
Yes, indeed. Once again, Oklahoma. Now, it was a closer affair going into the 3rd inning. I think Dom Stagliano did a fairly good job to start the contest, but But once it got to the 3rd inning, unfortunately, they really got his number. I think Oklahoma got Dom Stagliano's number after a few times in the lineup, and then just got him for all that he's worth. He wasn't able to get a strikeout at all. He ended up giving up 9 hits on 5 runs. It's unfortunate, but they at least lasted longer. I feel like in that one. Then Then the relievers ended up having Chase Santala ended up having facing one of his first adversities on the year, giving up 5 runs on 5 hits in just 1 inning. And even Najir Victor, who has been a very good reliever for UCF over the last season and this one, gave up 2 hits and 3 runs in his last inning of action in the 7th. There was at least a moment of hope where UCF was able to pick up a run in the 7th to stave off the run rule right away, but that didn't work. That didn't work. They ended up getting run ruled in the bottom half thanks to 3 runs there. So Oklahoma is not necessarily like a major school in the Big 12 in conference, which is what is kind of worrying to me. Like, this is honestly reminding me. This is reminding me of volleyball, where if you remember, Kyle, we were talking about how the Big 12 schedule to start was going to be soft, but then they would just hit this gauntlet at the end. And so I feel like now this is a little bit different, where in a sense where the Big 12 talent is like all encompassing in baseball, while it's not softball. Big 12's no slouch in baseball. Let's put it like that. And so. And so the fact that they have to go and on the road too, that doesn't help either. But they just kind of got a wake-up call, I would say. I think the biggest thing about this Oklahoma Sooners series is that it provides this team a wake-up call to show, like, hey, this is how baseball works in the Big 12. You got to step it up. And they started out okay. And I think it's just a matter of you got to start getting up on their level as they start to get used to you. I think that's a very good way of putting it. And they at least rebounded enough from that to where they didn't let it hang over them, because they ended up beating Stetson 7-1. They handled them in the midweek on Wednesday very fairly well in that one. Jack Ziska going 2-3. I mean, they handled them pretty good. Wiley Hartley to the start, getting the win there. So at the very least, they're not letting it hang over their heads. And even though Oklahoma was picked like tied for 6th, I think that's a good way to put that. So Oklahoma was projected to finish tied for 6th in the Big 12 standings. UCF is projected 10th. So that's where you can kind of see, okay, so that's where Oklahoma is. Oklahoma State is not going to be any easier, as they're going to be playing the Cowboys at John Juliano Park. They have home field advantage this time, so I'm be very interested to see what they can do with a Big 12 opponent on home field advantage. Because if you remember, we have beaten highly ranked teams in John Juliano Park before. See Ole Miss, but Oklahoma State's was projected to finish number 3 in the Big 12 this year. So if Oklahoma was a hard team to face, Oklahoma State's not gonna make it any easier on this team.
So yeah, and then over and above, you mentioned comparing the softball team to the baseball team. I would argue the coaching change is the big difference. Of course, Cindy Ball Malone, the Bear herself, still in the building, still developing. And I'll put it this way: if you could I'll put it this way. What kind of a start do you feel like the softball team's really getting off to, and they certainly is the road as ominous for them as it is the baseball squad?
The softball team is interesting because obviously they have a whole lot more to prove, I would argue, in the sense that because they are in one of the If Big 12 men's basketball is number 1, Erica said this, softball is number 2 in terms of the sports that the Big 12.
You mean now the award-winning PA caller / Sultan of stickball has said himself.
Indeed. Now, I will say that now Kansas is one of those teams, because obviously when you think Big 12 softball, you think Oklahoma, Texas, Oklahoma State, teams that made it very far. They start against Kansas. And Kansas, don't forget me wrong, is no slouch. Is no slouch. They had this starter Hamilton, Casey Hamilton, who had pitched like I think 25 or something like that straight shutout innings coming into UCF. Now, game 1, she pitched all of game 1. UCF managed to get her for 8 hits, 7 runs, handled Kansas 7-1 in that game. Sarah Willis also had a very good showing in the circle, 9 strikeouts in all of her 7 innings. Very solid performance to start off Big 12 conference play, but then you go into the rest of the series, and all of a sudden runs become very much at a premium. Game 2 ended up going to extra innings, 8 innings to be precise. UCF did manage to pull that one out thanks to Chloe Evans, who got that RBI hit. Caitlin Felton did an amazing job pitching all eight innings. This was a very defensive contest in this one. And then you go to game 3, and that was even more of a defensive contest where only 1 run was scored the entire time. But it's just unfortunate that run ended up being scored by Kansas in the top of the 3rd inning, which, by the way, had Casey Hamilton back in the circle for her second action of the season. And once again, so she started her scoreless streak all over again with 7 scoreless innings. She learned from that game one performance right there. UCF went more by a committee approach in this one. And the thing is, don't blame UCF's pitching staff for this one, because they only gave up 1 hit and 3 walks that whole game. So this was just one of those games. It was very defensive, and whoever was able to break through just once was able to get the win, and that just ended up being Kansas. Well, what I was really worried about coming into this weekend was their pitchers, to be honest with you, because you had Sona Halajian and Ava Justman, new faces coming in to this one. Caitlin Felton, of course, still developing. And we were trying to see who would step up to join Sarah Willis, because because even though Casey Hamilton pitched twice in this weekend, I feel like that UCF needs to have a 3-arm, like 1 arm per game type of strategy, in the sense where you don't want to have a pitcher throwing twice in a weekend, because you need to save them for later. The Big 12 is that much high of a conference that you need your pitchers to be as fresh as possible. And so, if anything, I feel like that the pitchers definitely showed up a lot more this weekend than I feel like they did at all in non-conference. But to be fair, Bear really coached scheduled tough for non-conference this year, but I think that also is to prepare them for something like this.
Sure. No, I think that preparation piece is ultimately a big part of that. Of course, you heard Jake mention that he will be in session, in position for UCF or not UCF, Oklahoma State. I'm sorry. He's going to be in position for Oklahoma State softball too. I'd be curious to how Oklahoma State and UCF do battles, what I should say. On the schedule here for the Black and Gold Banneret, I see that Texas is going to be here at the
yeah.
That should be a fascinating thing. Bryson, are you going to that one, or are we dependent on the Sultan for that one?
Well, Eric will, of course, be in the ESPN Plus booth for that one. As far as my attendance to it, that is very much going to depend on the baseball schedule. Baseball will be in Kansas. They'll be on the road, so I should be able to go to that. It's really just going to be a matter of will I get kicked out of the press box again? How packed will it end up being at that one? I mean, look, we've seen from
that blows my mind. How do you push legend Bryson Turner out of the press box? I have a problem. Who do I need to talk to? Bryson Turner.
You need to talk to Terry Mohajer to make a bigger.
Fix it.
I mean, look. It was. It's really. I think the fact that we're getting Texas at home at all is amazing. I think the ticket sales are going to be just absolutely bonkers for that game, because Texas is one of the top teams in the country in softball, and the fact that we're going to get them here and not in Austin is a very big boon to have. And then you have Oklahoma coming later too. So I think if anything, if there is a way, it's one of those so you're saying there's a chance, because anything can happen, I think, with home field advantage at the Plex. And so to have Texas here is much better than having them in Austin. I think this weekend against Oklahoma State could potentially be very telling because Oklahoma State ranked number 4, while Texas, according to our schedule, is ranked number 3 is what it says on UCF's schedule. But I know that, different polls and all that type of stuff. But point being is that Oklahoma State and Texas are 2 of the top teams in the country alongside the Oklahoma Sooners, who are just Alabama football levels of good.
Welcome to Gauntlet Town, folks.
Exactly.
These next 2. To wrap it up saying that in this particular piece, because I want the audience to be left something when you or Eric Lopez write it up on blackandgoldbanneret.com. And of course, my dude Bryson Turner was on top of it for track events. You had a crew event you went to even today on the day we record this, March 15th, the Ides of March here. You've been all over the place. So listeners, be well served to check out the nightcap forthcoming on blackandgoldbanneret.com.
Yes.
Bing! So in the meantime, let's go ahead and wrap this up, Bryson. I think we hit all the major spots as best we could. For Jeff Sharon, for Eric Lopez, for Nick Porcelli, thanks to Jake Ferraro for coming in. Bryson Turner, of course, thank you for taking us through the world of stickball, because Lord knows I couldn't. And of course, I am Kyle Nash, the student of the game. Find all of us on the socials there, of course, the blackandgoldbanneret.com on Instagram. And I always have to look up the Black and Gold Banneret on Twitter
at UCF Banneret _SBN.
There you go. Thank you, Bryson. So at UCF Banneret _SBN, Black and Gold Banneret on Facebook, all the socials. Check out the this pod, of course, on any of your podcatchers and all that happy stuff. And honor, joy, and privilege, my friends. But until next time, class dismissed.